Welcome back to another episode of the Beyond the Arc podcast. If you do enjoy this content, do me a huge favor, smash the like button, subscribe to the YouTube channel, comment down below on what you think about this upcoming NBA draft. So without further ado, we're going to jump right on into some NBA draft talk. This episode is all going to be about the NBA mock draft, and then we're going to jump into an NFL mock draft as well. I just want to discuss some certain players and that whole 9 yards, so why not make an entire draft episode? All right, so with the break in the All-Star weekend, we have an opportunity now to look ahead with the NBA standings and who is possibly going to be getting that number one overall pick. The best player on the board, right? That number one overall pick right now would be the Wizards. The Wizards are terrible. One of the worst teams in the NBA. They have some bright spots, but as far as their overall stardom, there is zero stardom. Right now they have 9 wins on the season. So they're 9-45. Over half their season is completed. Alex Sarr isn't the number 1A kind of guy. Could he be a serviceable 2-3 option? Sure. But as far as a number one option, they're looking at somebody else. So right now, based off standings, is what this mock draft is going to be like. The number one overall pick will be selected by the Washington Wizards, and they'll be getting Cooper Flagg. Cooper Flagg is somebody that I think I see him as an extremely talented player. That if I am a lot of teams, I'm looking to throw a trade offer to him because I don't know if he's going to necessarily be great for a team in Washington's situation, which is full rebuild, that whole 9 yards. I'd like to see him in a winning situation. See him playing with players, that have proven they've got what it takes kind of thing versus a complete rebuild. Now, of course, he can do it, and I think he would be talented on the Wizards roster, but let's say like the Oklahoma City Thunder, for example, they go out and they offer Washington 6 first-round picks. Like, could you really turn that down if you're Washington? And then Cooper Flagg goes in and he plays power forward alongside Chet and Shea and J-Dub. That, like, you already are adding fuel to the fire at that point, but why not? Yeah, it might in the long run, it would either hurt or help his legacy, Cooper Flagg himself, right? Because he wouldn't be the number one guy at that point. He'd be at a bare minimum, or I guess at a maximum, he'd be a 2 option, right? Because Shea's going to be your guy. So I don't know if that would be something Cooper Flagg would be interested in, but as of right now, I'm just going to do Washington drafting Cooper Flagg, number one overall. His pro comparisons, Andre Kirilenko defensively and Jalen Johnson offensively. I think he could be a little better than Jalen Johnson offensively. I think he'll shoot the 3 ball a little better. As far as, if you get AK-47 as your draft comp for your defensive side of the ball, I think that's a phenomenal place to be in if you're Cooper Flagg. He's got a bright ceiling. I think he's got a bright future ahead of him too. The next pick, New Orleans Pelicans taking point guard Dylan Harper. Dylan Harper, his pro comps are Kobe White, Jalen Brunson. Not the greatest comparison, but what I will say is New Orleans needs talent right now. They don't need wings. They've got Herb Jones, Trey Murphy, Zion. Hopefully, V. Missy is their future center. So then, and you have CJ here for your 2 guard. So now you're like, okay, what do we need? We need a point guard. Jet Howard, who knows his long term, with this squad. But as far as right now, I think Dylan Harper, pretty solid pickup for the New Orleans Pelicans, who are drafting best player available that will fit their needs. At number 3, this would be Utah. Utah would be just drafting the best player on the board, the player that would slide to them. And in this situation, it's Ace Bailey. Ace Bailey, pro comp, Brandon Miller, Michael Porter Jr., Rashard Lewis. 3 guys that had, Michael Porter Jr. is going to have a long career. Brandon Miller is going to have a long career. Rashard Lewis had a long career. Won a couple titles. Like, Ace Bailey, he kind of fits that mold too. Really long wing, 6'10". He's only 18 years old, and he's going to be a number 3 pick in the draft. This draft is really young. 18-year-olds all across the board. Cooper Flagg reclassified so he could be a part of this draft class, so he could graduate earlier. Dylan Harper averages 28 points a game right now. So that would be great for the Pelicans. As far as Ace Bailey goes, it's kind of crazy that you'd have back-to-back Rutgers players being drafted, but both of them are just extremely talented players, and I think Utah would do a lot and have a lot of benefit in drafting a dynamic wing in Ace Bailey, sorry. At number 4, I do have the Charlotte Hornets. They draft VJ Edgecombe, Baylor, shooting guard, forward, probably a shooting guard because he's 6'5". He's 19 years old. His pro comp, Andrew Wiggins. If the Charlotte Hornets get Andrew Wiggins, because right now offensively, you've got LaMelo Ball, you've got Brandon Miller, so now you focus a little bit on the defensive anchor, and athletically, you bring in some athletic freak to the offense that can help out. Now, this does kind of bring up a lot of questions on the future of Charlotte. I've talked about the idea of trading LaMelo Ball, but I wonder if they do fall and get VJ, if that ends up meaning that their future with LaMelo is possibly changing up. I don't think that would happen, but you're stacking up on guards at that point with Brandon Miller, who, yeah, he's a small forward, but a little bit of undersized small forward. And then you have, of course, you have VJ, and then you have LaMelo. There's only one basketball. So especially since there's a center right here available for you, you need a center. You traded for Nurkic, but he's not your long-term plan. That's why if this happens the way it does, Toronto snags Kaman Maluach, the Duke center, playing alongside Cooper Flagg right now, 7'2" center. His pro comp is Derek Lively. We saw what Derek Lively could do with a point guard in Luka, and although Emmanuel Quickley is not the playmaker that Luka is, I think that this would be a great situation for Kaman, because it would give him an opportunity to play with a bunch of young guys, and those guys are going to be run and gun. Emmanuel Quickley, his last name's Quickley for a reason. Brandon Ingram, RJ Barrett, that whole roster, Scotty Barnes is here. They could just run and gun, and I think, honestly, he's going to be a very solid defensive anchor for a team. A Rudy Gobert-esque is my more closely. This mock draft is just on Bleacher Report. That's what we're going over right now. So next up we have the Brooklyn Nets at 6. Now, Bleacher Report has them taking Kasparis Jakusionis, who's the point guard for Illinois. 6'6" guard. His pro comp is Chauncey Billups, so he would probably play the 2, especially if they re-sign Cam Thomas to a cheaper contract. Chauncey Billups, bit of a solid pro comp right there. A guy that's able to score off the dribble, but also have an effective three-point shot. Pretty solid there for them. At number 7, we're going to go over the Oklahoma City Thunder. This would have been the 76er pick, but of course it's now with Oklahoma City. They add another big. It is Asa Newell. He is the 6'11" center from Georgia. I've watched this kid play. I like the pro comps that they gave him, which is Bobby Portis, Jalen Smith, Marvin Bagley. Hopefully he's a little better than those guys, but if you're Oklahoma City, you're drafting best player available here because you've got everything you need. What this team needs is just time. They don't necessarily need a star-studded player. You've got Chet holding down the anchor defensively. You got Isaiah Hartenstein there. You're just looking for maybe a piece in the future, diamond in the rough kind of thing. Not in the rough per se because it's the 7th overall pick, but just a guy that's going to slide. Oklahoma City, they may end up trading this pick too. I wouldn't be surprised if they trade out of this draft because it's a good draft, but when you're Oklahoma City, you just got to look at needs. So let's say they don't make the finals this year. Let's say they get eliminated early, something like that. Then you got to look at maybe we need to switch things up and okay, we weren't a great three-point shooting team. Let's go trade for a three-point shooter that's out there that's on, a Malik Beasley that's on Detroit or something like that, and we can give up a pick. That's just an example, not saying that he would be worth that 7th overall pick, but that's just an example. Chicago then drafts at 8 Ben Saraf. He's a point guard, shooting guard, 6'5" guard. I don't understand this at all. They have 6 point guards on this roster. So when you have so many guards, why aren't you looking at a big man to replace Vooch? Vucevic is sitting there just draining money for the Chicago Bulls right now when you could go get somebody right around here or even trade this pick to go get a serviceable player. I don't know. Their direction is very questionable right now. You've got Kobe White. You re-signed Lonzo Ball. You still have Josh Giddey on this roster. Patrick Williams, you of course gave him that huge contract that he's not necessarily living up to. Then you've got Vucevic sitting there. There's a lot of random mixed in this, and there's no direction. Matas Buzelis is in here. He just performed in the dunk contest. He didn't win it, but hey. At number 9, we have the Trailblazers drafting Trey Johnson, Texas shooting guard. He's a 6'6" guard. Pro comparison is Buddy Hield. Portland, you've got, again, similar thing. The fit isn't necessarily there. You have 3 centers on this roster. You have Jeremy Grant, Anthony Simons. You've got Scoot Henderson. You got Shannon Sharp. Why are you going to go draft another guard? Why not go get another dynamic wing? Like, maybe it's just, I don't know, because right after this, Bleacher Report projects San Antonio to draft Con Kunapel from Duke small forward. Why would, I guess 6'6" and 6'6", they're both 6'6", so maybe he can transition over. But I see that as you should be drafting best fit, not best available. So if somebody jumps up on the board a few picks, then that seems like it would make sense long term because you're drafting the guy that you need, not the guy that you necessarily want just because he's best available there, if that makes sense. It's like the Kings. They always draft guards. Guard, right? But why? Draft what you need, not what you want. They finally did that when they drafted Keegan Murray. They needed Keegan Murray. Long wing, defender, and look at what has happened. He's panned out for them. He's playing well. Right? He fits his role. That's the issue with a lot of these organizations is you go from drafting Shannon Sharp to Scoot Henderson, Anthony Simons, Damian Lillard. You draft all these guards. Now they're drafting all these centers, or they have all these centers at least. Where are the wings? The Celtics are proving that you need wings to win a championship. That's why the Mavericks lost. They couldn't defend the wings. The Thunder, they're eating up on talent, but they're long, athletic team. That's why they're going to make it far. It's just interesting that a team like the Trailblazers will draft another guard. But that does leave San Antonio drafting Con Kunapel. His pro comp is Kevin Huerter. This would fit their roster quite well because he would be a serviceable player to come off the bench to play alongside, of course, Stephon Castle, De'Aaron Fox, Victor Wembanyama. And then if he could slide into that starting spot, hopefully he can defend the ball a little bit at the NBA level to where he can be a serviceable starter for them to be able to fully stretch the floor, allow De'Aaron Fox to run downhill, get to the basket, allowing Victor Wembanyama to do his thing and get to the basket as well. So we're going to leave it at that with those 10 picks. Then we're going to switch over now to the NFL. So the NFL, I'm just doing the top 10 picks. I do have one trade in here because I think there's going to be at least one. So we'll start with the number 1 overall pick. It starts with the Tennessee Titans. Now, if you're Tennessee, you need to evaluate your needs, of course. You say, of course, you had Mason Rudolph and Will Levis competing for that starting job, not really looking great. So then you decide, okay, we probably need to draft a quarterback here. Now, this quarterback class is not the strongest quarterback class that we've seen in past history. It's not last year's class where you had a few quarterbacks that were panning out, right? Hopefully it can, but as far as like star-studdum quarterbacks, this is not it. So then you say, well, why don't we go get more draft capital? We've got a lot of needs. We should work on the O-line. We could use a weapon on the outside, a receiver, or, not necessarily a back, but you could use a receiver. You could focus defense. Or you could go take your quarterback, just not at the number 1 overall pick. So then you say, hey, who wants the number 1 overall pick? I know that the Raiders would call because they need a quarterback. The Jets would call because they need a quarterback. The Saints might call because they need a QB. And there's one other team that I think would get the number 1 overall pick, and it's the Giants. The Giants trade up to 1 so that the Raiders and the Jets cannot jump them. They then draft their guy, and they select Shedeur Sanders. He's had ties with throwing the ball around New York City with Malik Neighbors. He fits that culture, the spotlight, that whole 9 yards. I think he would be a good fit there. He's not Daniel Jones. And later in the draft, you got to focus O-line. You got to get him some help. You got Malik Neighbors. You got Tyrone Tracy. You got Shedeur Sanders. The defense is all right. So I think you focus O-line. You maybe get him another weapon on the outside later in the draft. Deep wide receiver class. So yeah, I have the Giants trading up from 3 to 1. And with the Titans, why they would do this is their guy's going to be on the board. Also, the Giants, right? You're scared of the idea of another team jumping you, but you have to draft a QB. And you don't want to be stuck with the idea of the Titans trade with the Raiders, let's say, and then the Jets freak out and they trade with the Browns. But the Titans specifically aren't going to trade too far back. I think that they're not going to trade past like 6. So, anyways, since Shedeur went number 1, at number 2, the Browns then take the best player grade, which is Abdul Carter. He'll fix your O-line, of course, or fix your D-line, I'm sorry. Myles Garrett just requested a trade, so you have a huge hole now. And then maybe you could draft Abdul Carter and trade Myles Garrett on draft night for picks. Get back into this round, right? Because why not? Why not trade him to, late in the first round? Get back in there, and then, because you need QB if you're Cleveland. You need to work on that, of course, the D-line. The O-line could use some help. You might look at a running back. I think the receiving core is fine. Maybe a secondary receiver here they could use, but you've got Njoku and you have Judy. I think that could be serviceable for you. The defense, I think, could use some help, though. But yeah, you draft Abdul Carter, best player in the draft. So that leaves us with Tennessee at number 3. Tennessee then takes Cam Ward, quarterback from Miami. They get the guy they want. They get draft capital. It's similar to like when the Celtics drafted Jason Tatum, they had the number 1 overall pick in the draft. And then number 1, Markelle Fultz was supposed to be that guy, right? He was projected number 1 overall pick. Everyone liked him. Lonzo Ball was going to go number 2 to the Lakers. And then there was Philly at number 3. Philly then trades with the Celtics. The Celtics still get their guy at number 3, which is Jason Tatum, right? It's something similar that the Titans could do. You still get your guy, Cam Ward. Your quarterback's there. Like I said, you probably focus on like receiver and O-line to fix up that later in the draft. But I think the Titans take Cam Ward. And I think that he will be available at number 3. I don't think the Browns are going to draft a quarterback, and I don't think the Giants want him as much as they want Shedeur. Shedeur Sanders screams New York. All right, so that leaves at number 4, the Patriots. I thought about going O-line here. I thought, of course, Will Campbell would be something the Patriots probably should do, but I don't think they will. Because I think the Patriots see there's one player there that's super dynamic, that is a unique player that could play both sides of the ball, and he's too enticing to take, or to pass up. So I think the Patriots select Travis Hunter, and they fix their corner need. They need another corner alongside Christian Gonzalez. And then you get a possible wide receiver 2, possible wide receiver 3 area receiver in Travis Hunter. But you mainly are focusing on the fact that he's a dynamic weapon. You can use him any which way you want. Both sides of the ball for some games. So that goes to number 5. Jacksonville needs to focus defense. Their defense is brutal. Zero, they've got to focus defense here. So I think that they take Mykel Williams from Georgia, solid edge player that will help them get to the quarterback, put some pressure on the QB. He can also drop back and play a little bit of linebacker as well. So that leaves the Raiders taking best player on the board, and I think they take Will Campbell. See, when you're the Oakland Raiders in your situation where you don't really have too many bright spots, you've got Brock Bowers, you don't have QB, your defense is terrible, your O-line is pretty rough, your receiving core is pretty rough, your running backs are pretty rough, you got to take best player here. Will Campbell is a guy who's going to play in the league for quite some time. So I think they take him. In the offseason, you probably go get a QB, whether it's Kirk Cousins, whether it's Sam Darnold, whether it's Aaron Rodgers, somebody like that. But I think Will Campbell slides to the Raiders at 6. That leaves the Jets at number 7. The Jets then take Mason Graham, who is a top-rated player on some boards. He's definitely a top 10 player. It's just a matter of where he goes exactly. But with him, he's got some shorter arms, which we've seen in the past. That's okay, but it's not ideal, right? Aaron Donald made it work. He clearly is one of the best defensive players of all time. But when you're talking about your prototypical player, Mason Graham is technically not it, but his film shows that he is it. So I think that the Jets take a flyer on get a pass rusher in Mason Graham who can really dominate from his film. That leaves us at number 8. Panthers, this screams Jalen Walker. I think that he fits the Panther scheme. They need some defensive pressure because they were towards the bottom in QB pressures last season. So I think they take him. At number 9, you've got the Saints. They, of course, signed Kellen Moore as their head coach, the offensive coordinator for the Eagles. So then you say, how were the Eagles successful? How did they make a Super Bowl run? They had all the weapons in the world, which you don't have, but they also focused on the run game. You've got a running back. You got Alvin Kamara. Outside on receiver, you have Chris Olave. So there's 2 bright spots there. You don't necessarily have the QBs. Spencer Rattler's not the future. But you focus O-line here so you can focus on your run game. That way, if you do have to run it back with a quarterback in Spencer Rattler, he's got at least a little bit of time because he'll have one solid O-lineman. So you draft Armand Membu, offensive guard. He is said to be an all-pro offensive guard here. And I think that will help you in the long run building a piece. And like I said, there's QBs on the market. You've got a lot of dead money here tied into Marshawn Lattimore was tied in here. They've had a lot of bad contracts on this roster, right? So you got to go find a bright spot and you go get a young offensive guard that can play with you for long term to where you can get out of that dead cap money and then you can go and you get serviceable players in the future. You hopefully see an improvement out of Spencer Rattler. And then, like I said, you've got Kamara sitting there. Solid run game right there. And you've got Chris Olave. And Kellen Moore can get creative offensively. So that leaves us with the Bears. The Bears last year should have taken an offensive lineman. And then this year taken receiver. Because there's a dynamic receiver they could have had this year. They're not going to draft because they need to focus O-line. O-line, they take Josh Simmons, offensive tackle out of Ohio State. This guy, I think he's legit. I think he will be like a running mate with Caleb Williams. Caleb has so many weapons on this roster. You've got, of course, last year you drafted Rome Odunze, Keenan Allen here. You've got run game. DeAndre Swift is sitting there. All right, so there's some pieces here. The tight end is locked up. You have your quarterback of the future, but he got creamed in defensive, just walked by this offensive line. It was terrible. The defense is set. Your defense is set. It's solid. It's pretty good. I don't think you need to draft defense here. You focus on protecting Caleb. You've never had a QB who's been good, honestly. Jay Cutler was the last guy that was solid. But the defense has always carried the Bears. Now is your opportunity to focus offense so that you can actually produce something with this roster. So that Caleb has time in the pocket. Because we know when Caleb has time, he could do some things. But when he's always scrambling and he's got a defensive lineman chasing him down every play, he's not going to be able to do much. So, all right, guys. Well, I did want to bring in like Afshin Gianti, for example, to fit into that top 10. I just couldn't find where exactly. I didn't think the Bears would take him. The Saints shouldn't take him either. I would hope that like the Raiders wouldn't take him, something like that. But I think he ends up falling to somebody like the Cowboys or maybe the Steelers. He would be a good fit, and he screams Dallas. He screams Cowboy selection. But if you guys do want more of both sides of these drafts, the NBA and the NFL, let me know in the comments down below. But this has been another Beyond the Arc episode. Be sure to like, subscribe, comment down below how you felt about these mocks. And so without further ado, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.